for me, I do it for a few different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when I said earlier about seeing things with the military through 3 different lenses, you know, speaking of that child aspect, I know what it's like to, just like many other kids of veterans, I know what it's like to see a parent who needs help and isn't getting it because there's nothing available and because it'll be at risk to their career. Mm-hmm. And seeing them struggle and suffer.
Well, Giselle, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. You're just coming off of the Miss Universe Canada, and super excited to have you here. So just quickly tell us about that. That's amazing.
Yeah, I know, it was phenomenal. So nationals to win the title, that was in July. Yeah. And there were 52 other women there, amazing, beautiful, smart other women. And it was such a privilege to be able to meet all of them and make friends. And yeah, after about 4 days or so, you're going through interviews, presentations. You have to do an advocacy, interviews and an advocacy presentation. Yep. And you get marked on everything and, of course, scored on all of that, plus how you conduct yourself. So, you know, are you going and talking to people, or are you being a little shy, that kind of stuff. And then on stage, your finale gown and your walk. And, you know, I was lucky enough to do a good enough job that I won. And
Congratulations.
Thank you, yeah. So
you didn't bring your sash.
No, I didn't. Oh, my gosh, yeah. Yeah, so I should have. That would have made for a good photo, you know, but... Yep. No, it's great because actually I have a second sash to go with it now because I just came back from South Korea. And so because I won Mrs. Universe Canada, and that's Mrs., not to be confused with Miss, I got to compete in Mrs. Universe. And so that was in South Korea earlier this month, and I just got back from that. And for the first time in almost 10 years, Canada made top 25.
Oh, my goodness.
Out of 110.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was amazing. So that's my... Yeah.
That would have been an amazing trip.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of our sponsors were phenomenal. Got so much skincare.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
It's exciting to have the privilege to have you here.
Thank you.
Mrs. Canada. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Canada. Do they say Mrs. Canada or Mrs. Canada Universe Canada, or what? Like, what's the proper title?
The proper title is Mrs. Canada Universe. And a lot of times you can just say Mrs. Canada because then the sash is always going to say which Canada, like which pageant it is. There's really 5 big pageants. Okay. You know, when it comes down to it. And Miss was around way longer than any Mrs. pageants were. And I never even knew about pageant systems for anyone in the Mrs. category until last year. And I realized, I was like, oh, wow, like you really can, it's okay if you're married and you have kids, like you really can still get out there and do stuff. So it was mind-blowing. I was so excited. Yeah. But you've got the big ones for both the Miss and Mrs. categories are going to be World, Universe, Earth, Globe.
Earth?
Yeah,
wow.
Earth.
What?
Globe, and I think there's another one. But those are the big ones. Wow. And then there's a bunch of other not as well-known ones, but lots of other ones too.
Earth. That's pretty funny that they have Earth. Yeah, surprising. Anyway, that's amazing that you were able to do that. That's exciting. I feel like I've known a few people, and probably they're just different federations or possibly the same federation over time where they've been involved. So, yeah, it's pretty neat.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And so it's so that federation competes. Is it how many countries are involved across the world?
Oh, all of them.
Really?
A lot of times you can have more than one person from a country.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because you can have, for example, because there's 110 there, right? So there was Mrs. USA, but then there was also Mrs. America. Oh, and then there's also Mrs. USA Southwest.
Wow.
Right? Yep. So it all depends. Some of them have directors where they have to qualify nationally to go, and then other people are able to enter without a director. It just all depends the route you want to take.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the other cool things about you is that you served in the military. So maybe just give us the short story, your military service, and so we know kind of your background.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and that's kind of cool because that's really what set me apart really with pageantry is when I won Mrs. Canada Universe, I was the first Canadian veteran to win a Canadian national title. So it was really exciting, and like I took that. There was a responsibility, and I didn't take it lightly. Like I made sure that I was going to do everything I can to talk about the military veteran families, initiatives, programs, and everything because of my background. And mine is I see things through three lenses, right? So I grew up a kid in a military family. So I know what it's like to be the kid seeing like your parent not being there for Christmas, birthdays, all that kind of stuff, right? I have the lens of being the spouse of somebody in the military, you know, having to provide and take care of the household when they're not there, but then my own journey myself as a member in the military. So I was in the infantry. I joined in 2008, and primarily my career was in education and training, and I just recently retired this past August.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's pretty awesome. So exciting. Yeah. You know, here's a weird question for you. This comes up occasionally.
Okay.
Why is it that we travel to the U.S. and they would, say a prayer over dinner and they'd be, thank you for our troops overseas. And like, why in Canada do we never acknowledge our troops?
Oh, man. So that gets
maybe there's no answer.
No, there is an answer.
Yeah.
Honestly, I just think personally, and my views and opinions do not reflect on anyone else except myself.
Yep.
I honestly think that Canada as a country has lost its patriotism. Mm-hmm. Like there's no real direction for it. We used to, like if you back up to when we had troops and we were actively over in Afghanistan in the early 2000s, there was a lot of patriotism and love for the troops. People were, at dinners, like they were acknowledging them. You saw trees with yellow ribbons tied around them. You don't see that anymore, and no one cares. To the point where they even call, the war in Afghanistan, it was a conflict. I'm like, no, a conflict's what I have with my husband over choosing what to eat for dinner. Yeah. So it's I just find that kind of disrespectful to those who are there and the lives that were lost there. And no, I 100% wholeheartedly agree with you that we don't do that. And as far as the answer goes, like I think it's our own responsibility. And I think if people aren't doing it, then it's on them because it doesn't take that much to say thank you when you see someone or to have your thoughts go out to them or wear red on Friday or anything like that. It doesn't take that much, right? Yeah. So I think really it comes down to society as a whole and like our lack of it.
And I found it interesting too that just over the years, in the past, I think military service was something that you could do, and people would be like, oh, okay, well I could do this, military service or this, and then it seemed like that in some ways faded where people were, oh, why were you in the military? It's like, what happened?
Yeah, what you do wrong.
But like, and it's different in the U.S., I think, and maybe other countries too, where it's one of the many careers that you choose. And in Canada, it seems like there's so many people that don't even know someone who's been in the military. Like that's shocking to me. So because I know a bunch, and now I know you, so one plus. And so it's odd to me that it's not, and maybe it's a promotion issue too. Maybe Canadian Armed Forces doesn't promote it as well as it's promoted in the States. I'm not sure. I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know.
The commercials in the States are way cooler. Like the advertising.
Promotion value's high, yeah.
Oh my God. Like I watch them and I'm like, I want to join.
Yeah. I want back.
What? That looks so cool, right? And like I've seen some of the ads and the commercials and everything for the CAF, and I think some of them are getting a lot better. I think that what's happened over the last few years is we've hemorrhaged a lot of troops, a lot of really good troops.
Yeah.
A lot of really, really good, like can influence other people to join because they're so good at their job.
Right.
Soldiers, right? And they're not there for lots of circumstances and reasons that we don't have to get into, but they're no longer there. And then when you add that along with there being things like the budget cuts and the real drive force in talking about mental health and families as well, and when you kind of look at seeing they don't really have that much there. And granted, better than like other organizations like RCMP and other PSPs, like they are starting to get a lot more resources, thankfully, which I think is great for them. So I don't want to say that they don't have any, but, you know, the MFRC, for example, the Military Veterans, Military Families Resource Center and everything, like using them for what they're meant to be used for families and stuff. So you couple that all together and it's like, it kind of looks like a little bit of a soup sandwich. And so it wouldn't really be appealing for a lot of people to join, you know, and then issues with dress regulations and how those all changed. Like when you're in uniform, what I really like is I like when I see someone and they're just in their civilian clothes. It used to be you could look at them and be like, oh, I bet they're probably in the Army, right?
Yeah.
You can't do that now. And they're changing the dress regulations back to being like what I would consider more professional, because I understand them wanting to be more inclusive before. But obviously it didn't work or help to get people to join, right?
Right.
You know, there's that stoicism and professionalism that comes when you put on that uniform, that pride in wearing it.
This pride, yeah. That's what I was going to say. Exactly.
Exactly. And I think we really need to work, I guess I have to say they now, they really need to work on bringing that back and getting that back. And when we see that, you know, I would like to think we would see a rise in people joining and that want for
I think it would take almost nothing to, like, if we could just have we make jokes about our non-existent Navy, but we have a Navy. We have, like, and we just need more visual imagery, like, of us doing stuff that's important. Like, I think we had more before. I don't know where it all faded away to, but
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I agree on the dress code too. Like, in my incredibly short time in the military, like, there was such a sense of pride of being in uniform and being in like, you know, in your big parades, and that was awesome. And it was like, you really felt good about it, I think. And when you can feel good about it, then you can share that with other people, and it builds that national pride that you were talking about. And it's like, yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah, and so like. And I will get pushback, and I've seen other people get pushback when they talk about it because they're like, "Oh, the color of your hair shouldn't infringe on whether you're a good soldier or not," and absolutely not. Like, man, if you're an amazing soldier and you are able to do everything tip top shape, I don't care. I don't think anyone would care what your hair color is. I'm not that. Yeah. So like I can't take advantage of that at all.
What are you even talking about right now? What's this hair color thing? Okay, what are you talking about?
So the dress regs had changed a few years ago where you
that you have a hair color issue?
No, you could have green hair, you could have purple hair.
Oh, that, okay, yeah,
you know,
okay. I thought.
So they changed it all like that.
I thought you were talking about gray hair, and I was getting a little bit sensitive. So no.
No, so they did that, and like there was pushback. Yeah. I didn't like it. Lots of other people didn't like it, and they're like, "Well, it shouldn't matter, right? If you're good at your job, you're good at your job." Yeah. But one thing I really loved as an instructor, like when troops come in the meal line and you're serving them their food, the instructors serve the candidates, the troops, and there's a few reasons for that. You know, quality control, sure, but the other reason is that's like your one time where you can kind of like drop the I'm the instructor facade, and you're actually genuinely looking at them. And how do they look? Do they look like they're about to fall over because they're so tired? Do they look like they just bawled their eyes out because they feel like they made a huge mistake and they want to go home? Yeah. You know, how, like, you're looking at how is their morale? When we do the salute acronym for when we are, you know, on an objective and like looking at the enemy, like morale is there, uniform is there. What do they look like? So if I have a troop that comes through the line and he or she looks very disheveled, and they look like they like all their idea of self-care, like brushing their teeth, brushing their hair, all that has gone out the window. Like that's actually
that says a lot.
That's a sign that I need to check in with them and see if they're okay, right? But if we throw dress regs right out the window and just tell them, okay, you can do what you want, you don't have to, it's like, okay, well, I don't know. I argue that it makes it a little harder to be able to check in on them to see like, hey, how are they doing, right? Because a lot of times people will hide behind that. Yeah. So that's
I guess part of, you know, honestly, part of dress regs is just that it creates a sense of unity as well. Like if we all dressed completely different, like we just came out of thrift stores, then it would be like, oh, what team are you on? I don't know. Yeah. So that's an interesting component too. So.
And I agree. It is about that is that camaraderie. It is.
Yeah.
It is that.
Like
for
if we had even a basketball team, if everyone got to wear whatever uniform they wanted, like it would be chaos.
Right.
Like it wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
So, so yeah, it just kind of builds that sense of pride. So yeah, it's kind of nice. And that you had mentioned too about the the mental health stuff, and that's a big deal to you too. And is that the training? Are you doing training on the mental health? Is that what you do training on, or is it a bunch of everything?
Oh God, a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like in the military, when I was education and training, I was instructing. So I taught troops in various different courses that they were going on, and I absolutely loved it. I genuinely loved it. But as far as like what I'm doing now, I mean, like I do a lot with looking at that mental health side in training, more so on the study side. So learning more about it, the differences between post-traumatic stress disorder, should we be calling it a disorder or an injury, who has a higher chance of developing it or more susceptible to it. And, what's the difference between that and like moral injury, and then moral injury and resilience, because that's something that is really new and up and coming, is the moral injury part, and how you can have a moral injury and not have PTSD. You can have PTSD and not have moral injury, but if you have both, they can't heal at the same time. Like you kind of have
interesting. Yeah.
Because if you have PTSD and you have a moral injury on top of that, for example, say something traumatic happened to you, and then you expected your chain of command to have your back and take care of you, and they didn't. Well, you're going to feel betrayed because you had a belief to your core, to your ethics and morals, that they should have protected you, as they should, because they're your chain of command, and they absolutely should. So that would be a betrayal, kind of like sanctuary trauma. And if you have that on top of your PTSD, and you're only addressing trying to work through, with your journaling and stuff, the PTSD part from the original incident, that feeling of betrayal, that moral injury, won't go away. You're still stuck with it, right? And then you think, okay, well, maybe I'll just get out. Maybe I'll leave and I'll go do something else. So maybe you get out of the military and you decide to join law enforcement. Well, you still have that moral injury.
Right,
so how are you going to trust?
It with you.
Yeah, you're not going to trust your new chain of command now because you haven't dealt with that. So.
That's it. And so it becomes layers on top. Wow. Yeah. That's interesting. By this point in history, PTSD and other injuries that happen in the military are probably incredibly well studied. And but it's always more to do, of course. But
they're studied. Yeah. They're studied for sure. Yeah.
Is it beyond? It's outside what we're talking about, but there must be some decent science on predictability of who might end up with PTSD. Is there predictability to it?
In some cases, yes. So arguably, women can be more susceptible to developing PTSD, PTSI. However, in the studies conducted, they found that it was primarily men, like speaking just to the military side of things, men who were in combat trades, right? And things that increased the chances, or at least made it worse, were things like the dissolving of a personal relationship, whether it's losing a family member or going through a divorce or something like that. Coping and addictions, if they're dependent on some sort of substance, then that's going to affect them as well. And then if you topple a trauma on top, then it's going to be hard, right? Then they're going to self-medicate, cope, and everything. And so all those types of things, there are some studies in that sense, but there's definitely still more that are coming out, which I love, and I love reading up on them, because I think that's an amazing question, right? If we can identify these things, then we can come at it in a proactive, preventative measure instead of reactive and just trying to be oh, well, here's a Band-Aid, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the general population, if someone said, hey, military PTSD, we would immediately jump to, well, that means frontline combat or in contact combat, where, we're actually physically interacting with the combatant face to face or something. But it's different than that. It's not that, because, military experience is much broader than that.
Absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that people think that, because what it does is it kind of gatekeeps the term PTSD.
That's true. Yeah.
And then you have people comparing, like trauma comparing, right? Like, oh, there's no way I
Right.
could have it, even though I have night terrors and I can't sleep and I have insomnia and I have trust issues and I don't want to leave my house. But there's no way I can have it because I wasn't in combat.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think there needs to be the dissolving of that notion or idea, because firefighters, they're and police officers and paramedics, right? So firefighters, police officers are typically going to be first on scene before the paramedics even arrive. And some of the things that they see, like, you know, they're susceptible.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Paramedics are people taking calls, operators taking calls and have to be on the phone with somebody while, you know, like, it makes me emotional when I think about it. Like, they're susceptible, right?
Yeah, you bet.
Because if people who are, you know, operating the drones in a completely different country from where those drones are operating are susceptible to possibly having PTSD from what they're going through, then you better believe someone who literally is listening to somebody's potentially, like, you know, it's a traumatic event. It's stress that occurs continuously after a traumatic event. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And
You know, it's an interesting, maybe to me anyways, interesting is my daughter works at a vet clinic.
Okay.
And every day she sees 2 animals die probably, and she sees their owners struggling with that. And it's like they're losing family members. And her ability to cope with it has, I think, just over a couple of years has just unbelievably improved.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, but you know, and it's similar to, maybe it's not as same as seeing a human, you know, demolished in a car accident or something, but like she's dealing with unbelievably emotional events and being able to deal with it. And I guess if someone had said 5 years ago, can your daughter deal with something like having to put down an animal or someone's pet, who I would have said no, but now she's able to do it, which is amazing to me. I'm fascinated that she's able to cope now.
That's amazing. That's so good. Yeah, and it's that resiliency aspect.
Yeah.
You know, and resiliency can always be worked on, and you know, like you don't have to say like it's not the same as a human, because it's independent. If that is something that impacts her to her core, then that is a stressful event for her. It doesn't have to be the same as mine or yours or anyone else's, right?
Absolutely.
And so the fact that she could develop that resiliency is phenomenal. I think that's really great. That's really great.
You know what? You know, it's been fun doing this podcast with different people, and one thing that's starting to come up as a more common thread is how people are invested in helping people overcome adversity. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very interesting thread that seems to be popping up more, where people are, you know, like we have one lady on whose child had passed away, and she had to deal with that and manage it. And other people who have just had other horrible things in life, addictions or whatever the case may be, just bad things. And now they're like yourself, now they're champions for people to overcome adversities. And yeah, it's pretty powerful, actually. It's good that we can do that as a society. And it's pretty cool.
Kind of helps bring the
kudos
faith back
to
in
you.
humanity. Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. For me, it's more like for me, I do it for a few different reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when I said earlier about seeing things with the military through 3 different lenses, you know, speaking of that child aspect, I know what it's like to, just like many other kids of veterans, I know what it's like to see a parent who needs help and isn't getting it because there's nothing available, and because it'll be at risk to their career. Mm-hmm. And seeing them struggle and suffer. And in hindsight, I can look back and say, well, it was because he didn't have what he needed.
Yeah.
Right? I can say that now because I've had those 2 other lenses to look through and understand. At the time, though, when you're an itty-bitty little kid and you're wondering, you know, what's going on? You know, why are they isolating? Isolating, by the way, the worst thing that you can do when you're going through stressful situations like that. Why are they isolating? Why won't they come play like they used to? Like, you know, why am I like not allowed to like be around, or why are they so snappy? Like I remember having to close the windows of the van so carefully and so quietly because it was the old Astro van where you pop and lock it out. Like
Dang,
that.
I had one of those.
Right?
Yep.
And I remember like when we'd have to like pull it back in and put my hand carefully underneath, because if you just popped it down, it made that like pop, snap sound. Yeah. And like that was triggering. And so like as a kid, you absorb that and you're like, oh, I got to do this so carefully, and not really fully understanding why, because you don't see wounds on someone's soul.
So that's interesting, because it brings up a couple different things. But one is, you know, our children are exposed to us as adults. They see us as potentially flawless. And so when we see a parent struggling, I don't think a kid processes struggle in a parent. I don't know exactly what they see. Maybe a psychologist would see that differently. But, and then as we get older, of course, then we can process that it was struggle in the past. And so that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's hard because you take it on yourself, right? So it's like, oh, it must be my fault.
Yeah.
And I must have done something wrong. And then you grow up with that, right?
So does that experience, like if my dad, for instance, who I'm not saying he did, but if he had that type of challenge, is he passing some of that along to me just by virtue of how he manages that challenge?
Oh, yeah. No, there's, from the forum that I was at a few weeks ago for CIMVER, for those who might not know, the Canadian Institute Military Veterans Health Research, there was lots of stuff on generational trauma, passing it down. And regardless of what area you were in, military, first responder, law enforcement, all that, there is something to be said about generational trauma being passed down, especially in times where there weren't things available. So now they're having to cope on their own, right? And when they're coping on their own, along with the mental load of taking care of the family, they're the provider. How are they going to do these things when they can't even like function, can't even leave the house? That's going to impact that child. Then that child, that's forming their own narrative of how they see themselves, how they are in relationships, how they parent. And then that's going to get passed down. And it's only when we have access to being able to, one, talk about it, break the stigma, and have things like, for example, the Garnet families. They work on rebuilding those relationships and those bonds. Like, big shout out to the Garnet family. They're fantastic, right? But to work on building that up so that we can change the mindset around that and hopefully minimize that generational trauma that may be passed down.
Yeah, it's fascinating that 20 years ago, you never really heard of passing on trauma like that. It's something we've recognized only recently, really.
Yeah,
it's pretty fascinating.
Even like 10 years ago. When was it? I think it was like 10 years ago. You know, I say this embarrassingly about myself. You know, I had someone come to me and say, like, I'm really struggling and I'm going through this because, you know, of their parent. And I was just like, come on now. You know, like I was like, that's insulting to your parent. Like, you know, and I'm not happy that that's the way I handled that conversation at all, especially knowing what I know now. Yeah. But I mean, it kind of just goes to show that even as of 10 years ago, it wasn't something we talked about. It wasn't something that was acknowledged. And thankfully now that it is. Thankfully it is now, you know? Yeah.
You mentioned the organization that did you say you were now a director?
I'm on the board of directors,
Board of directors, yeah. So the name of the organization again is?
CIMVER. CIMH. Nope. CIMVHR.
VHR.
Yeah, Canadian Institute Military and Veterans Health Research.
Okay. Yeah. Is Canada doing a better job with its veterans? Like, has it improved over, say, 20 years ago, or just make up an arbitrary date? But do we have work to do? Like, could we can always be better.
Yeah. You know, I think that's just the glowing narrative, is that it can always be better, because it can now. Sure. Is it better than 30 years ago? How old was I when I saw that stuff? So yeah, now I feel old. 30 years ago, yeah. It's better than 30 years ago. It's better than 15 years ago. And it's better from even the last 5 years. Mm-hmm. But the reason for that, I would argue, is because veterans themselves are the ones who have to initiate these programs. Right. Right. So I don't think it's fair that mental load is being put on individuals who already are struggling and essentially have to create something themselves because it's not there. I think the public and like pretty much, when I say public, I am including literally everybody who's not them.
Yeah.
I think they have that responsibility to, pull up their waistband a little bit, put their shoes on, and get to work a bit, because, like, it's hard, and it should already be there.
Yeah.
And we have these studies coming out. So then, like, let's get to work. Let's start improving things and making things that can be in place for the families who are going to be going through this 15 years from now and 30 years from now.
Yeah. It's a challenge when a vast portion of our Canadian population is disconnected from the military and veterans anyways. So it's like people, you might literally, this is a possible conversation. I might say to you, hey, what do you think about veterans in Canada? And someone might say, we haven't been at war since like the Vietnam War or something, or even like World War II, something crazy.
Yeah.
We don't have veterans, like a lot of people wouldn't even know if we have it. They wouldn't even know if we have a minister of veteran affairs or something, or anything. Like, there's a big disconnect. Whereas in the States, veteran affairs is a big deal. Like, they talk about it. It's in the news all the time.
Yep. What they don't know, just to add to that, what they might also not know is how, when our troops were in Afghanistan, that was a war. So, last time we were, as the Canadian military, involved in war was in the early 2000s, and I think tapered off by about 2010, 11, still remained afterwards, but as far as within a combative role there. So like in the early 2000s, even 15 years ago, Canada was at war. They might also not realize that veterans make up the majority of the homeless population in Canada.
That's a scary thought.
It is absolutely scary. It's heartbreaking, because some of those people are actually still serving. Why in the hell do we have soldiers who are in need of going to food banks and shelters and everything, because they don't have the wage to be able to support themselves, right? And thank God for food banks. Absolutely, thank God for food banks and the Veterans Food Banks Association food bank, and like all of them. Right? And it's sad that it's needed, but thank goodness we have them. And they also might not know the rate of suicide for veterans, right? The fact that since we have stopped our role in Afghanistan, so since we came back from that combative role in Afghanistan, we've lost almost double the amount of soldiers to suicide than the 158 that we lost, that were killed there.
Wow.
That died there.
Amazing.
Right? And they might not know that either. And it sucks that they don't know that, because they should. Because if they did, I genuinely believe that they would want to help. Because I've seen it. When I was doing my pageants, that was my platform. And they didn't know any of this. And I talked to them about it. And then they were literally like, what can we do to help? Yeah. So we just have to be able to get that information in front of them, but understand, like, it's going to be uncomfortable. People don't want to hear about the fact that people have died by suicide, right? Yeah. They don't want to hear that. They would rather believe that everything's great, And
then it's likely that we would intellectually chalk up suicides to some external stimulus, not having served in the military. Like, we would say, oh, well, they were probably damaged, or something was wrong with, something going on outside of that service, and we would attribute it to something different. So. Oh yeah.
But it's for those in the military, and I haven't even touched, the rate of like PTSD and suicide from firefighters, police officers, correctional officers who literally have no resources at all, and they're surrounded by darkness each and every single day, right? Not even counting them, but speaking to my own lane, it's not that because you serve in the military, you're inevitably going to die by suicide. It's because, like, can you imagine being in that low of a place that you genuinely, even though you have family and friends, you genuinely don't think there's any other way out? Like, that's a dark and scary place. And the fact that, when I come back to the chain of command, for example, and you have the responsibility of taking care of your troops and your care, they're not numbers. They're not. And like, I get it. Like, oh, they're replaceable because, you know, one gets out, we'll just pull a new recruit in. Yeah. And in that sense, if you're talking about like cleaning weapons, sure. But
that's the way movies deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's like, bring me another.
Exactly. Yeah. And I've been told that, that no, you are just a number. That was told to my face by someone in my chain of command because I was talking about like, no, you can't keep treating us all like that. And they're like, well, no, because you can be replaced. Tell that to the friends and family of the person they just lost. They're not replaceable.
Yeah.
And to them, they sure as fuck were not a number. Yeah. Right? And yeah, it means holding people's feet to the fire and making them uncomfortable a bit. But that's how we do it. Yeah. That's how we get it out there.
I wonder if there's, you know, one thing that would immediately come to mind for me would be that, you know, suicide may be accentuated if you lose that sense of purpose, like when you leave the military and you don't have this sense of belonging and being part of the team. That might be a challenge too. But I've heard too that, and you know, I think the COVID era brought a lot of things to light as well. And I think one of the things that people started to recognize in studies was that in particular, men started committing suicide because there was no other way out. Like it was just, there was a purposeless life in front of them that had no meaning or purpose, and it was easier to not be alive than to struggle through it. And that's a sad, tough place to be. Yep. Yeah.
And some even think that there's so much of a burden that it's almost like, well, if I do this, I'm doing these people a favor because they feel so broken inside. And they don't realize that, like, man, everyone matters to somebody. Yeah. You know, everyone matters to somebody.
Yeah. One of the, Bold Strong is supported by Partner Staffing, it's a staffing firm. And over the many years that I've been involved in employment, it's been very interesting to me to watch what happens to veterans too in employment when they come out of the military and they're trying to get employment in the general population. And it's more of a struggle than anyone would imagine. Because and I think a lot of employers look at people from the military, regardless of the experience they have, and they like. In fact, I even had this conversation with a guy just like last week, where he had come out of not our military, but out of I think he had come out of the Korean. No, it was Korea. Okay. So he had come out of the South Korean military, and he's in Canada and wants to be in Canada. And I said, okay, well, what did you do in the military? Or what training did you have? What experience did you have? Not good. Like, it was not good. Like, he was not prepared to enter the rest of society. He didn't have anything really. And that was challenging because he needs now to get into education and like get skill sets that he can use. 'Cause like, he literally said to me, I said, what are you really good at? And he said, well, I worked with the U.S. military and they yelled at me every day for 10 hours. And I'm like, I don't know if anyone's ever asked for that skill set before, but you're first on the list if someone does. But like, you need more than that. Like, he was in an MP, and you need education now. Yeah. So you need to be supported through education too.
Well, we call that skill set, that could be reframed as does well under pressure, right?
Yes.
And is able to handle a chaotic environment is how that would be phrased. But, I think it would be a missed opportunity if we didn't also highlight some of the good things. Because when you talk about education, like, if you are in the military, there are funds available for you to have some of your education covered. There are, whether you're Reg Force or Reserve. And when you get out of the military, depending on how long you've served for, there's also funds available there for you to go back and get an education as well, and to help cover that. Yeah. And so they do see that. They do see that. In fact, a lot of times if you're talking to officers, for example, a lot of them are going to have degrees, right? Degrees, diplomas, everything like that. So there is a strong sense of education. I think it really varies on the trade, right? Yeah. Someone who was in, let's say, they were a technician, or let's say a weapons tech, right? Or they were, let's say, in a medic, right? They're going to have really good transferable skills, for
absolutely.
sure. Opposed to someone who's in the infantry, they can mop a floor. I'll tell you that, right? But it's about how you frame it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe they don't have the same education as someone who is a medic, but that can, reliable and dependable in chaotic situations, works well under pressure. You can sure bet they work well as a team and also well as alone. So you've got that there. They are resilient in the sense of they take direction very well, right? They're going to do what they're told, and they're going to do so in a organized and detailed fashion. Mm-hmm. You tell them like, hey, this has to get put together. Like they'll learn it, and regardless of trade. Like when you get through basic, that's what you're taught, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
I think to add to what you're saying, along with the education, it's just going to be more people like the Veterans Transition Network, and all the transition centers and units, really getting more gas, like more oomph to be able to do that, so that they're not undersourced. 'Cause we have those things available for them to do, so that they can be put in the right direction. We just need to make it more available.
Yeah, absolutely. I super agree with you because, like that was one of my best experiences was some of those they're really just good life experiences, like how to maneuver under pressure and how to like deal with things that are chaotic and in a reasonable fashion. And actually the other thing too that's easy to overlook, because sometimes we get so into the physical things, mop a floor or lift something, tie a knot or whatever, but like the skills you learn to interact with other people is pretty amazing, really. And like your interpersonal skills, I think, go up when you're stuck with people that you have to be with all the time and to depend on them and trust them and know that they're going to do something important. That's a skill. It's hard to put on paper though. Mm-hmm. Like that, it's a valuable skill, but really hard to like write it down and say one of my top skills is, and it's like, I don't know. That's a tough one. It's a tough one to put on paper.
That's true.
Yeah.
Hopefully you didn't hear my tummy gurgle.
No. Do we need to feed you?
No, I'm okay.
Cool. What else? So one of the big things you're doing is you're being an advocate, but I guess you're out speaking and you're out promoting different things. What are the big things you're out promoting right now? Like what's exciting right now in your world?
So I just came back from New Brunswick, and so in Fredericton they have the Mission Afghanistan War exhibit.
I live there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, then you have to go. You have to go. Make sure you go and check it out because it's only up until the 9th or the 10th. I think it's the 10th, and then it gets then it'll be taken down. And so this is the first time in 3 years that it's been out for display for people to see.
Wow.
And it's completely interactive. You're talking 14 hours. Over 400 interviews with like veterans, family members, government officials, celebrities, everyone, right? And it's immersive. You can just click the screen, you can go click, 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 and you listen to the interview you want to listen to, and you get to see things like information on like the vehicles and like maps.
Wow.
And it's really great, really, really great. And we need to get more people on board who want that because it's traveling, right?
Oh, okay.
So we need people who are going to be like, yes, I want it here at our location for 2-3 weeks or however long, right? So we can get that out. So that's that.
That would be amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. Like I said, it's been locked up for 3 years.
Wow.
Right? And this is the second time it's been out.
That's bizarre.
I know.
It's a super good resource.
I know. It was started with DHH, and I think Stephen Harper helped with that as well, like getting it all initiated and started. And we really need to get it out more. And on top of that, I would say, doing a lot of speaking, a lot more advocating, making appearances, going places like this, and just having those conversations. I've got Brilliant Minded Women's Gala this coming weekend that I'm the honorary guest for, that I'm so excited.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah, it's their 10th anniversary, so I get to meet some really amazing Brilliant Minded women.
Where's that? Is that
Toronto?
Toronto? Okay.
Yeah. And Sound of Remembrance, the second annual Sound of Remembrance in Ottawa, the weekend after that, November 9th. And all the money raised there is going to go to Soldier On, a phenomenal organization that helps soldiers, whether it's veterans and family members, for like initiatives and activities and programs that they can do to have that camaraderie. That. And on top of that, my clothes that I wore and the national costume that I made for Mrs. Universe, that is all going to be in Edmonton Fashion Week. So
where did those clothes come from? You can tell us more about that. That's really interesting.
So all the clothes are just clothes that I bought, but I assembled it in a way that, this put together on this is going to represent these things. And for example, the Operation Medusa dress, right? The Operation Medusa dress is black and it's got rhinestones that kind of like slither all the way up, and then the accessories are all snakes in the hair and around. So it's like, okay, Medusa.
Yeah.
But then the ring has 5 blue stones. And because this outfit is representative of the entire time that we were in our involvement in the war in Afghanistan, there's a ring with 5 blue stones. Blue, because that's the color that represents when we have a friendly-on-friendly accident. And yeah, that's what happened. We lost 5 soldiers in Afghanistan to friendly fire. So that's why there's a ring with 5 blue stones, because it's paying respect to all of them. The 4 from Tarnak Farms, and then from within Operation Medusa when Charlie Company was strifed there. So that's that. And the nice thing is, so all these outfits that I've assembled and put together, they all have the opportunity to talk about important key points from Canadian military history. And the models who are going to be wearing them are female veterans or current serving, and they're gonna wear them.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I'm really excited for that.
Yeah.
History and fashion.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
I think
What
so.
is there like? Where will that be covered? Is there like website, or where is it going to be covered? That should get some press.
Yeah, I think it should. I think it will. That's so Edmonton Fashion Week, 17 November. I believe it's going to be streamed. And then my national costume that I wore at Mrs. Universe is going to be there too. And when you go to an event like that and you've got all these different countries, you wear something that's supposed to represent your country. And never in pageant history across the board for Canada ever, regardless if it was Miss or Mrs. and whatever one, for Canada, there's never been one about the Canadian military. And so that's what I aimed.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was my aim. So it was inspired by Mother Bereft, the statue in front of Vimy Ridge.
Okay.
Where she, the Morning Mother, as what people might know her as. So it was inspired by that. I sewed it together using the issued sewing kit. It has army netting on it. It has buttons from a World War II tunic.
That's awesome.
Right? But the most exciting, important part is the poppies on the back. Those were handmade by different veterans across Canada to be sewn on to the back of this dress. So it's really, really one that unites, as I feel, and that was my aim for it, that unites veterans across Canada and pays respect to them, those who are serving, who no longer are, and those who are no longer with us. And that's what my aim was for my intent behind that costume.
That's awesome.
Because I love them so much. I have so much respect for what they do and what they've done, right?
Yeah.
And for their families too, that I wanted to really emphasize that and show them that. So
you must have a picture of that. You got to send it to us.
I do. Yeah.
So, send it.
I got a picture.
Post that up. That's awesome. What happens now with Mrs. Universe for you? Like what's the next steps, or is there more?
So I got top 25, which is awesome. I'm so proud of that. And so now I just keep my Mrs. Canada Universe title until I crown my successor. So,
cool.
Come July, I have from now until July to annoy the hell out of people.
Yeah.
With conversations like these.
Yeah.
Because that's my mission and intent is, while I have this sash and these opportunities to make an impact, I'm going to make a crater. Like that's my goal. So
that's awesome. That's exciting. And so you don't go, like, I guess in certain things you just keep going back but this you have a successor. You do it once and you don't get multiple occasions.
You could. If I wanted to go into a different pageant system, so like this was Universe, if I wanted to go to World, I could try and compete for that. But I really, for me personally, and I know other women do because they genuinely love pageants.
Right.
For me, I feel like having this, I'm the first veteran, like having a first attached to what you're doing.
Yeah.
For me, I feel like if I were to do it again, it would dilute that. And I don't want to. You know, this was, I only started pageants a year ago, and I won a nationals. And then I went on to South Korea, which was phenomenal, and I made top 25. Like, that's a really
amazing.
big deal. And I don't want to take away from that. And also, I want to show people, I want to show everybody that regardless of your employment, you know, if you feel like you have a typically more like rugged job, as a woman, you can still embrace your femininity, and you can still do things like a pageant with, and even if you're married and you have kids and you thought that that was definitely not something that was available for you, like, no, you can, man. If you've got something you're passionate about and you want to share it with people, I don't care if what your job is, like, come out and try it, because it's very empowering.
Didn't you tell me you did like some fitness competitions as well before?
Oh yeah, years ago. Years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk like it's a different life.
Yeah, well, it felt like it.
Yeah.
It felt like it.
What federation did you go through?
ABBA. I did 2 shows with them, and then I did one with, was it WBFF, I think? And that show actually was here in Calgary when I did it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. The people there were so kind.
Yeah.
So kind. So.
I did ABBA, Alberta Bodybuilding.
Yeah?
Yeah, that was my first show.
Really?
But they don't exist now. They've gone. COVID wiped them out.
What? Are you serious?
Yeah, it just wiped it out. Yeah.
But all the other ones are still there.
Yep. Yeah, it just didn't survive. It was, I don't know, it just didn't survive. So it just kind of got eclipsed by other federations, and it just didn't have the backbone, I guess, to keep going. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah. And, you know, and I guess one might argue, how many do you really need? You know, you have the Mrs. environment where you had 5 or 6, and it's a bit like that, and like the Mrs. Universe environment where there's worlds and Earth and
so that's separate from Universe though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Universe was when you went to Korea, and then.
Yeah. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so Mrs. Canada.
I won.
Gotcha.
I specifically won Mrs. Canada Universe, which means I can only, like, that's the qualifier to get into Mrs. Universe. Mm-hmm. So anyone who wants to compete in Mrs. Universe either needs to have, like, I think there's ways that some can direct enter, but some you have to win nationals in order to go. And so that's specific for that. It would be similar to physique, bodybuilding, and because you guys have different categories, right? It'd be kind of similar to that, right? Like if you won in physique, you wouldn't be going into bodybuilding, right? Like you won physique, that's it, that's the top.
Your physique, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh.
So.
Interesting. Yeah, well, ABB is gone.
Oh, crazy. And which one did you just do?
I was just in WNBF, which is World Natural Bodybuilding Federation.
Nice.
So, yeah. It's a growing one. It's pretty big, but it's all natural. And so, yeah, it was kind of neat.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did you have to take a lie detector?
Yep.
Nice.
Yep, that was second time around. So I get so nervous. I feel like I'm going through I can't go through the border without I feel so guilty. I have some like deep-seated guilt that I don't know what it is. It's really bad. I have a hard time. I get off an airplane and I have to cross the border. And I struggle with that. It's really tough on me.
For just because going into a new place, or because
no,
when they
I
ask
just
you
feel
to
like they're going to ask me, do you have anything? And I'm like, no. But then I am back somewhere in the back of my head. It's like, you're lying.
Oh, okay.
They're going to tell. They're going to know.
I get that.
That's weird. And even though it's like, no, I'm not, it's just, there's just some weird thing that just kind of makes me feel when I get pulled over by the police, it's just like, man, it's bad news.
When you did your lie detector test, are you then overthinking like your inflection and how you say no, or how I get that.
Yeah. And the last one it was kind of funny. So, and the people that do it are just like, they're just saints. They're amazing. And I was in this one room. It wasn't much wider than this room we're in now. And there was like a floor-based air conditioning unit that was kind of blowing in my face. And then I was like, okay, I know when you're lying, you blink a lot. And this air is blowing in my face. And I'm like blinking like this. And I'm like, he's going to know I'm lying.
Even though
So
you're not.
yeah, and I said, you're going to have to shut that off because I feel like I can't do this.
Oh yeah, or
Yeah,
if
it
you
was
like,
quite funny.
I imagine probably like if you squirm a little bit,
Yeah.
and then they're probably thinking like, what are they trying
Oh,
to do? Like
yeah.
change the pressure?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That would be intimidating. That would be
Yeah.
that'd be intimidating. I would overthink that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not. It makes me super uncomfortable. So, even though I've nothing, like you literally go into it with zero to hide, nothing,
Yeah.
and just like, oh my goodness, I'm so nervous. I can't believe this is happening. It's so weird.
Oh man.
Such a weird experience, and I have that experience every time I go through customs.
Oh, but hang on. So going back to the bodybuilding though, like you won,
Yeah.
and now you get to go on to the next level
So-
to try and win that one. Do you have to do a lie detector for that one too?
No,
Okay.
only because it's within 6 weeks.
Oh,
If it was
okay.
longer than 6 weeks, you would have to. So you're always subject to urinalysis, though, and so which I think the lie detector test peels out a certain group of people.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going to peel out 100%. Nothing's 100%. There's one's going to slip through, and quite honestly, someone fails almost every time.
Oh.
So we know that people are trying to cheat the test, but someone fails frequently. And then I think the P-test, the P-test you can cheat, but it's all time-based. Like if someone stopped using steroids or other drugs within a certain time frame, the P-test wouldn't catch you. But if you're in the pro environment, then they can P-test you at any time.
Oh, okay.
So, like technically, they could just walk in the door today and say, "Hey, we need a sample," and then it would catch me. Because, like, I guess I technically before the next show, I'd have about 4 or 5 weeks right now. It would make no difference at all. I could jump on steroids and gain 20 pounds of muscle, impossible. But unless I still have to pass a P test, possibly at any point along the way, and certainly if I win at the next show. But
Okay.
yeah, so like I won last year, actually won a pro card in bodybuilding, because it's funny you brought it up. So I won in bodybuilding, which I hadn't expected. And then this time around, I competed as an amateur in physique, and I won a pro card in physique. So now I have 2 pro cards,
Nice.
one in bodybuilding, one in physique. But they only let you compete in one or the other when
Right.
you go to the world's competition. So I'm going in physique this time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So and that's in Boston in a
Nice.
couple of weeks. So
And
yeah.
what does having that pro card mean?
The pro card, so it's kind of like, I don't know how I explain it exactly, but you compete as an amateur until you win your category. And then when you win your category, you become a pro. And then it's almost like it's like culling the herd. You peel out the kind of the top person from the herd, and that person is going to compete against the top people from other shows.
Okay.
And so you have your amateur shows where everyone competes. You peel out your top level, and then that group's competing, maybe across a broader area. So everyone's heard of, the Olympia or the Arnold competitions, and
Yeah.
those are the people that have come up through the system. So they've competed at the local level, then they competed maybe at a state level, and then they compete, maybe in the Western U.S. and then they get their pro card, and then they can qualify to compete at the Arnold or the Olympia. So it's a filtering system so that you have one big event where you can say this group of people is the top of the top.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's kind of what it does.
Okay.
And I guess the other small point is that technically, as an amateur athlete, you can't earn money because that would make you a professional athlete.
Okay.
At the pro level, when you win, you would actually make money, and so
Oh,
the
cool.
top 2, 3, 4 people would make money at those events.
Nice.
So yeah,
Okay, so then going on to Boston, then, manifesting good vibes and everything.
Yes.
And when you win that, where do you go after that then? Is that then to Olympia?
retirement. That would be it. No, there's no. So the WNBF goes. It's kind of its own system, and it feeds up to Worlds. So Worlds is the top event. It would be like the Olympia for natural bodybuilding.
Got it.
And then you have IFBB, which is where you'd see, the Jay Cutlers and, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers. That's IFBB, and that goes off to the Olympia.
Got it.
And that would be the pinnacle events there. And so, you don't go anywhere after the Olympia. you just do it more. And that's what you could do. You could just do more of those events.
Okay.
So that's kind of where my question came from.
Yeah,
like,
similar.
could you compete more and be more Mrs. Universe?
Yeah.
Like, but you
not in
sounds
Mrs.
like
Universe.
No. Yeah, yeah.
Like I could, after I crown my successor, I could come back the next year and try to do it again.
Oh, okay.
But again, like I wouldn't want to. But yeah, like similar to how you were saying you won your card in bodybuilding.
Yeah.
And then you went and you won your card in physique. That's kind of like how some people will go and they'll win the crown in world, and then they'll go to like Galaxy and they'll win the crown there. So it's like they've won multiple crowns, but they've won multiple crowns from different organizations.
Yeah. It's interesting when you're in one of these things, how you get a little myopic and you think everything's about hockey and then everything's about fitness and then everything, it's funny that you get into it and then you kind of ignore that there's thousands of people competing this weekend in some event that I have no clue what it is, Like I have a few friends that do equestrian horse jumping and shows and stuff, and it's like, I have no clue what you're doing. I don't know how many people are doing it. If you win, I'd be like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
It's funny though, because like a lot of people wouldn't know what you do.
Yeah, no, I had a few people tell me that they're like, you're not. You don't have that title. That's not you. And I was like, no, definitely is. But it's because they were confusing it with Miss.
Right,
so
sure.
Miss Universe Canada, that's actually Colleen Bull. She's going to Mexico like tomorrow or whatever. And for Miss Universe.
Miss Universe.
Right, but that's only because they don't understand that there's Miss, but then also Mrs.
So is the qualification to be Mrs. you have to be married, or is it, what's the qualifier?
You can be married, divorced, widowed. But here's the thing. So literally up until last year, Miss, to be in Miss Universe or Miss any, like speaking just to Miss Universe. Miss. To be in Miss Universe, you had to be, I think it was like under 30 and you couldn't be married or whatever. So they actually changed all that last year. They got rid of it, opened up the age so that you can be whatever age you want.
Oh, wow.
You can be married, divorced, you can have kids, you can be pregnant, like all that stuff. So they completely abolished that.
Wow.
Which kind of sucks because it's like, that's what kind of kept them separate.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But
yeah,
like,
that's right.
Whatever,
that
it's business,
too.
right? It's business.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Huh.
I don't get paid to care. So
yeah. Wow, that's fascinating. So then that would open up more regional events that would feed into the bigger events, possibly.
I don't know. I imagine it. I imagine it probably could. So, I mean, Miss Universe has been around significantly longer than Mrs. Universe, and that's why a lot of people didn't know that we had Mrs. Universe. But it's big enough though that people saw value and still cheered me on, which I really appreciated and loved.
It is neat that it's like a lot of these events have turned into, I don't want to say they become exclusively advocacy events, but it's cool that they've become more than just beauty contests. Like there's more to it than that. And that's really nice. And it's, that's powerful in a way, really.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like I see it as, like I've always kind of had this notion that, you could be an absolute 10, but if your personality is really shitty, like I'm sorry, you're a 6. Yeah. And maybe you're a 7, but maybe you're just like, you've just got like an amazing sense of humor, and you're very caring, and you're just a great person, then you're a 10. Like that's how it's always been. So like what I really like in Mrs. Universe was there was heavy marking and a lot of emphasis put on your advocacy and your presentation on top of how you looked and how you interacted with people. Like that part was really important because it says right in there like it's for like women who have a cause where there are going to be some organizations that, and you see it a lot with the Miss again because they're so young, where it's a lot about modeling, and that's fine. Like some people get into pageants for 2 reasons. It's either because they're trying to have some sort of like modeling career, which is great. Like if you're gorgeous and you take photos well, then absolutely fucking rock it, right? Or they get into it for advocacy because they have a platform that they want to be able to share.
Sure.
So that's really what it comes down to.
It's interesting, the whole ranking of people thing, because it's so subjective.
I know.
And really like, you could say someone, you could probably have AI could generate a 10 out of 10 picture of someone that's a 10 out of 10, but it's going to be different for me than the next person. And yeah, but you know, and really in some ways it's interesting because it compares favorably to the way we look at IQ. And now we've opened up IQ to be IQ and EQ and all these other Qs. And it's, you know, you can't just solely look at someone and say, well, that's that. Like, and kind of pigeonhole someone because it's a dynamic 4D environment. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, and maybe in a way, I think as you were saying it, what I was thinking was that maybe I could broadly take a look at someone and say, this person's a 10 because I actually want to spend time with this person, whether they're good looking or funny or smart or fit or whatever. But that there's a scale there that makes them a 10.
Yeah. That
kind of transcends other scales. I don't know. It's kind of interesting.
I think everything's scalable. I have a lot of issues with trust. Like I have a lot of issues, and I tell my therapist that all the time. Like, oh no, I don't trust this. I don't want to go. Nope, don't trust them, right? And you know, I had said I don't trust anybody, and she's like, I don't think that's true. I think there are some people you trust, and I was like, well, yeah, within reason. She's like, well, what's the reason? I'm like, well, because they've proven through X, Y, and Z that I can trust them. And she's like, okay, so clearly you trust people, and I was like, okay, all right, that's fair. So I scaled that. I literally made 16 qualities that I think somebody should be judged on a scale of 1 to 5 for each quality. And based on how they score within those 16, you know, they're going to get an overall score, and whatever bracket they fall into is now going to determine, is this person trustworthy that I'm going to tell them my lifelong secrets, or they may be in the middle where, like, you know, they're around the water cooler at work. Or are they someone who's like, nope, wall, right? Huh. So everything's scalable. That's
you need an app.
Yeah.
Just put it on an app so everyone's on the app.
I should. Like I went full Rain Man on this. And it's pretty concrete. Like the scaling system, the scoring system on it. Like I looked for all loopholes, and it's actually pretty legit.
Could be an app.
I'll give it to you, and you can use it on people.
Wow.
You know, be like,
so
how trustworthy are you?
Interesting thought to that is, do you, like, if you look at the kind of the moment when you're alone, and do you trust people at first blush, or do you not trust them, or do you trust them and then they inevitably let you down, or do you not trust someone and wait for them to kind of build up the trust?
It's both, and it's dependent. So if I already have trust established with somebody, then if they're like, oh, here's so-and-so, they're a friend of mine, then I have an immediate level of trust for them, because I trust that first person, and they wouldn't hang out or associate with an asshole, right? Or, you know, a bad person or whatever. Like, so there's that there, and then I wait for it to, like, okay, will it bottom out or will it grow?
Right.
If it's a complete stranger, then it's like, no, there's no trust. But I think that's just honestly, I think that's just like pure survival.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's
so
instinct.
Safety.
It's a safety. Yeah. It's an instinct. There's nothing wrong with that. I think if we went around trusting everybody 100% right off the bat, you know, we'd have a much higher crime ratio or percentage, you know?
I think I struggle with trust in that I tend to trust most everyone, and then I get burned. But I haven't learned how to not trust people at first blush. Oh. So I got to learn that somehow.
No, don't. No, don't do it, because I don't like that I struggle with trust for people. Like, I want to be able to trust people because I want to see and believe that everyone is genuine and there's good in everybody. Right, I think that's the mindset you gotta have.
I feel that way about one.
Yeah, I think that's the best mindset to have. You don't want to have the mindset of like, no, everyone's awful, and they have to prove that they're not awful first. Because can you imagine my God, they would probably age so fast, like, just because that would be so much undue stress, right?
That's true.
So like, no, don't change. Like, it's unfortunate that you get burned, but I think if you were to give that part of yourself up, I think you'd be really losing what kind of makes you genuine, right? And like what might draw people to you.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah, it's always tough to be on the other side, and it's like, oh, I gave something. I was vulnerable with that person, and then it's like, then they do something. And it's like, oh man, they took advantage of what I told them, and it's like, that's not. Yeah, it just kind of makes you feel kind of cruddy.
Yeah.
And guarded, I guess, is what it ends up doing.
True. What I've learned from that is it's on them. It's their failure as a human being, basically, for being a shitty person, right? Because it doesn't make you any different because you're not the one who did the bad thing. Yeah. Right?
You know it's interesting as a society, I think we end up with societal, like we could measure our society and say, is Calgary more trustworthy today than it was a year ago? And I think it has a lot to do with the struggles that our societies like experience. And so when you have like regardless of what the stats may tell us, there's way more homelessness. And you had brought up homelessness before. There's way more homelessness in Calgary now than there was even a few years ago. And now when I go outside the office in Calgary, I'm less comfortable. Like, and I think you could measure that in trust. I don't feel comfortable because I don't know what's around the corner, and those 3 people sleeping over there, I don't know what I can expect from them. So then it changes the way we can walk around our cities, and then that's got to have a downstream effect, I think, to the way we deal with people.
Absolutely. Like, shoot, I remember when I lived in Calgary as a kid, being like, hey, I'm going to go to the park. Yeah. The park wasn't in sight of the house. The park was like down somewhere else, or like maybe I went into a completely different park like 3 blocks over. But it was okay, like, come home when the streetlights start to turn off, like make sure you're back, right? Like that kind of like, or turn on, right? So it's like, okay, around the dusk time, sweet, I've got like 2 hours to play. I wouldn't do that now.
No, those days are gone.
So it does have an effect because like it just sucks because kids don't get to grow up the same way that like we are so privileged to be able to do that, you know? Serving strangers lemonade at a stand by yourself.
And not being monitored with cameras and stuff.
Yeah, like, so it does kind of suck. I hate that for kids growing up right now.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. Well, you know what? I am sensitive to the fact that you have kids, and they're not far from here right now. So let's wrap up. I'd love to have you back sometime too, and like we'll talk more after.
Absolutely.
We get through the next few months. So but it's so amazing to have you, and so proud of you and all that you've accomplished. And
thank you.
Hopefully you can do lots more.
Thank you.
Advocate for the good people out here. So cool. All right. Thanks for coming on.